Well, thank you for joining another edition of Bridging the Gap. I'm Pastor Nathan Brozier. If you will please just share this broadcast to your social media platform and hit the subscribe button right below to this broadcast to get weekly updated sessions. But today I want to introduce and welcome to our audience for the first time, my good friend, Pastor Devan Cole, who is currently the lead pastor of Christian Heritage Worship Center in Kokomo, Indiana. It's a pleasure having you on here, Pastor Devan.
Hey, thanks, man. I appreciate the opportunity. I'm honored.
Great. Well, let's get started. I want people to know a little bit about you as people have watched this over we're coming up on, this is my 8th month now running this. And so God's been good and a lot of pastors have been coming on, a lot of leaders. And so I just want to give some people some insight to really your world, our world, because some people think that it's all about glamour, the glitz of pastoring. And, I've had people say, man, I wish I had your job. I'm like, do you really? Do you really?
Yeah, get down to the fine print.
Exactly. You like the fact that we have a little bit more liberty. We can say that. We have a little bit more liberty than your 9-to-5 workers, but we want to break some things down here. So let's get started. Pastor, I remember meeting you for the first time when you and your church came up to play in a softball tournament in Salina at our Missions Labor Day fundraiser. Now he's probably going to be a little reserved in this area, but he was a baller. Yeah, we used to pound your team, and all of a sudden we get this lefty guy coming out here just stroking the ball, hitting it hard, and you just impressed, and we're like, who is this guy? He's a baller.
Yeah.
So you came and you represented, and
that was a while ago.
It's been a while. I was thinking, I've been in Muncie now 11 years in January, and so you started coming, now let's see, probably 2 or 3 years before. What would we say, 13, 14 years?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd say, and I was freshly saved too, so
Freshly saved.
It's hard saying what I did then.
Freshly saved.
Yeah.
I like that. Well, let's get going. Well, talk to us a little bit about where your journey began, and tell our viewers about your upbringing.
Okay, upbringing. I grew up in church.
Mm-hmm.
Grew up in a Christian church a Christian school as a kid, and I would say around teenage years, pretty typical.
Mm-hmm.
Faded away, did my own thing. But, I had good parents, hardworking parents. But, I guess pretty normal, I guess you could say. And it's when I got to high school is when I really started experimenting with things and really figuring things out on my own, and realized I was not grounded in my faith, which is so important for young people. We've got to ground them in our faith. Because when I was hit with the world, man, I was hit hard and had no roots and just couldn't answer a lot of questions and, just went way off the map. But
so would you say your parents kind of brought you to church, or you guys would say, were they involved? What was your...
So, I would say when I was younger, my parents were pretty involved in church. My dad grew up in a Christian home. Doors were open. He was in church.
Gotcha.
But he was kind of the rebel. Okay. And then my mom never had any real dealings with church until she got married to my dad. And they were, they had me and I was at the wedding. So they were like, hey, let's do this thing right and raise us in church. But they had their problems and as a lot of couples do. And they ended up getting divorced when we were late teenage years. And there was a lot of, so our family kind of strayed from church.
Right.
So now I do remember my dad taking me to church one early Sunday morning. He knew I'd been out drinking and he woke me up early Sunday morning. We hadn't been to church in months. He said, hey, Devin, we're going to church today. I said, we're going where? He said, we're going to church. I was probably 16. And so it hit me. I was like, man, I'm so far from where I was. And we knew as a family, we weren't where we were and just kind of drifted, I guess. And right now you see this a lot with the COVID thing. I mean, people, you just have a tendency to drift and that's where we were. We were in that boat heavy.
Gotcha. Let me ask you this question. Talk to us a little bit about how God called you into the ministry and how old were you? And I like to ask this question because there's a lot of people that ask me, how do you know you're called? And how did God speak to you personally?
Oh man. So you asked me my age. I'm terrible with that, man. I don't remember those things very well, but I would say early to mid 20s. Early 20s is when I got saved.
Okay.
And I mean saved.
Sure.
And when I talk, about being saved, I don't mean it was just like a mind.
Sure.
I changed my mind on things. I mean, God truly did a heart transplant with me
Amen.
immediately, and it was powerful. It was unlike anything I had experienced before. So, I got saved, and then everything changed for me, and it was this process. You fast forward, and again, I'm not good with these numbers, but I would say 5-6 years later, I felt a calling into ministry. I didn't know what, but I knew God was calling me.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have a clear focus, didn't have a clear direction, just knew I was called. And that eventually turned into God giving me a dream. And I had a dream, woke up from the dream, and I had a dream that I was a pastor of Christian Heritage, a church that I got saved at, in the church that I am currently pastoring. And this dream probably came, I would say, almost 8 years ago now, and maybe 7. Had this dream, woke up, and I was like, whoa, no. What did I eat? I was like, no, I forgot. And I really did. I dismissed it big time. And that week, we had prayer meeting, and I went to the prayer meeting. I was sitting there praying, and somebody come put their hand on my back. And they said, Devin, God has showed me that you are going to be the next pastor of this church.
Wow.
And I just hit my knee. I mean, I just went to the altar and I said, God, I don't want this. I mean, really,
Sure.
I wasn't looking for it. And so I kind of prayed and I told God, I was like, listen, I know you're not supposed to like barter with God or anything, but I was like, God, if this is you, I need 2 things. Please, I'm asking for 2 things. One, make it clear cut, sign in the sky. Like, I don't want a pastor if I'm 99% sure it's God. I want to know
good.
100% because it's not something I want to just take lightly or do.
Sure.
And then the second thing was, God, I'm not going to campaign for it. If this is truly your will, you'll make a way. And I'm not going to campaign for this and put my resume in or anything. And, I don't know. I don't know the next questions that we're going to ask and stuff, but I can tell you that God answered both of those questions powerfully, or both of those requests powerfully.
So you, how old were you when? See, I know you're now the lead pastor at Christian Heritage. We had Pastor Steve Bradshaw on a few sessions back, and he was explaining about his kind of involvement in that program in that church as well. How did that all come about to you? Where did that, you mentioned that there was a man that came up and prayed for you or laid hands and spoke a word. So how did that all transpire?
So again, this is foggy. My memory isn't the best, but when I first got called, this was before the dream. When I first got called into ministry, I talked with Pastor Ray Freeman, who you know, and he was excited and he took me under his wing. And I would say 4 to 6 months after that is when he passed away. So I was devastated. I was like, man, God, why would you take my mentor away? This, you just called me.
Sure.
And then Pastor Steve came in, and I'm telling you, Pastor Steve, that man is anointed and gifted. And he came in and it was just a powerful time we experienced. And then when he transitioned, it was while we were looking for a replacement for Pastor Steve, is right before Pastor Russell came in, is when right as Pastor Russell came in is when I had that dream.
Oh, okay.
Now, Pastor Russell spent 5 years pastoring Christian Heritage, if I remember that right, 5-6 years.
Yeah.
And so it was right before him when I had that dream and that confirmation in the same week, right as he was coming in.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, and then things unfolded and we went silent. Like, it was like, just like total silence for about 5 years. And so I was like, maybe things have changed. Maybe God's plans have changed. Maybe I did something wrong,
Right.
I promise I'm not going to campaign for it.
Sure.
And then I would say that last 6 months to a year, God really started opening things up and
wow.
just moving. And I mean, undeniable, powerful ways.
Wow.
Confirming to me what I was to do.
Okay.
So,
Well, leading up to that point, a little personal about yourself. I mean, now I know you met your wife, Andrea,
yes.
at Christian Heritage.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about that story and how you guys, how that transpired.
So I was going to church there for a while, and I was single. I had some bad relationships.
Sure.
I was not, and it was my fault. The saying is, it's not you, it's me.
Yeah, right.
It was really me.
It really was.
really was me.
Yeah.
I wasn't good. And so I met Andrea at church, and I knew her, but never like that, And then I remember, actually, it's funny that we say this because we were going to Salina for that softball tournament.
Okay.
And my mom came, or no, she dropped me off because I was having car problems, something. She dropped me off at the church, and we were going to take a bus to you guys, to Salina.
Okay, yeah.
And Andrea came, and my mom was in the vehicle with me, and her and I were just sitting in the vehicle, and Andrea walked by, and she goes, "Man, Devin, she's beautiful. Why haven't you tried to date her?" And I was like, "Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question." And then it's like, it's like a couple Sundays later, man, I seen her walking off the stage, and I just realized, like, man, she is beautiful.
Right.
And then just kind of, I pursued, and and I got lucky.
Thank you, Mama.
Yeah,
thanks,
thanks,
Mama,
Mom.
for opening his eyes.
That's right. And
now, how long have you guys been married now?
we have been married 7 years.
7 years.
2013. Am I saying that right? Yeah, this is our.
This is coming on your 8th year.
Yes,
okay.
We're coming up on our 8th year. And we dated for 2 years before that.
Okay.
So we've been together for 10 years.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And how many kids you have right now?
Two boys.
2 boys.
5 year. The oldest will be 5 this month, and the youngest is 3.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And they're full of energy, man.
That's an understatement.
Yes.
That's
yes.
Especially at camp this past year. I was
Oh,
like, man, whose kids are these?
Yes. Yes.
That's Pastor Devin. And
Yes.
Andrea's.
They act like their mama.
Well, you mentioned Pastor Freeman or Bishop Freeman.
Yes.
Would you say he was probably the most influential person? But you also brought in Pastor Bratcher as well. But
yeah.
Who would you say is probably some of the
most
influential?
Man,
people?
I couldn't pick one.
Okay.
I couldn't pick one. It would be Bishop. I knew him as Pastor Freeman.
Yeah.
It'd be Bishop Freeman. It would be Steve. It'd be Pastor Russell. Those 3 combined, I've learned a lot.
Yeah.
And to say that I have just one, I can't. I can't say that. But I would say that I've got a lot of gifted, talented, called men of God that I have gleaned from over the years.
I think we've talked about this in several sessions in the past, and I think sometimes we forget how important it really is to have other leaders kind of giving us accountability, so to speak, like speak into our lives and allowing us to be vulnerable too.
Yeah.
And I think with pastors, a lot of the times we're afraid to allow ourselves to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
But that's what we need, because man, otherwise we have so much built up tension and pressure upon us that's all on your shoulders, and you have nobody to release that to, or even maybe to steer you. Like God may be pouring stuff into you, and you're just sitting there thinking, okay, what do I do with this? And that's where we need guidance and leadership. And unfortunately, we have a lot of pastors today that don't have a lot of spiritual leaders in their life to kind of speak into them and give them direction and help them.
And another thing on that, Nate, is, and there's 2 sides to that.
Mm-hmm.
But the pastor also, we as leaders and as pastors have to be willing to take that too.
That's it.
A lot of times that ugly word of pride comes in, and it can be masked in a lot of different ways. But vulnerability, like you said, is huge. But we have to be able to allow people. We have to be vulnerable and be like, hey, I don't have all the answers.
Yeah.
And as a pastor, you don't always want to say, I'm not real sure. We feel like we have to have all the answers, but in reality, we're human beings.
That's the truth.
And so there's 2 sides to that coin, and you've got to accept it, and you've got to be able to take it.
That is it. I think Bishop Keith O'Neill has spoke this over the other day, that we have so much immaturity on this level because you mentioned pride, and that is it in a nutshell. Because when some things we need to hear, whether we want to hear them or not, somebody needs to say, hey, I don't think where you're going, that direction is really wise in
Yeah.
the season. So
Yeah.
here's what we do as pastors or even leaders. If you're in a church and maybe you're not the lead pastor, and all of a sudden you have that correction, so to speak,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden you feel like, as Bishop O'Neill said the other day, "Man, I feel led that God is leading me somewhere else all of a sudden."
Oh, yeah.
God
yeah.
just leads you because you just got corrected.
That's exactly
You know,
it.
could you imagine when our
Yes.
parents said, "Hey, go clean your room"? I feel led that you're no longer
I'm
my
going up for
parents.
adoption. Yes. Yes.
I mean, and that's what we're seeing today.
it's yeah.
People
yeah.
are jumping churches to church to church, but not just church members. We're
No,
seeing leaders.
Yes. Yes.
Leaders and we're seeing the job work. We just had a conversation before that. We have general managers out there right now that are like, I can't get people to come
I
in
need work. I need people that can work. That
because
wanna
we
work.
got people that are just jumping ship over or don't want to work. That's another story for another time.
Yeah.
But-
But that jumping ship is very. I used this analogy a couple of weeks ago with our church, and it was when I coached a basketball team.
Mhm.
Right, I came in and talent was low,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And numbers were low. We didn't have a lot
Sure.
of kids with this team. It was a small school, it was a high school team.
Mhm.
And so I was like, listen, guys, if we go up and we're matching against somebody talent for talent, we're going to be at a disadvantage. So we've got to have an edge somewhere.
Yeah.
So we've got to have that conditioning. I mean,
Yeah.
you got to be in better shape.
Sure.
When you get into the fourth quarter, they're going to be tired. You can't be. And I kind of told that with the church. A lot of times in church, we've almost like babied. It's like we want to fill up the roster,
Yeah.
but we'll do it at the expense of, hey, we're going to do push-ups today, but if you don't feel like it, don't worry about it.
That's
You're
right.
good.
Yeah.
We're going to run sprints today. We're getting in shape, but if you don't feel like it, I don't want you to leave. But that's kind of where it's not just church, but it's everywhere, man.
You're right.
People are like, they run from correction, but the correction and in that process
Yeah.
is where, man, that's when you're going to get stronger.
That's right.
And especially in church, we can't be afraid to challenge our people. As a leader,
Yeah.
we can't be afraid to challenge people because people need it. We need it.
Yeah.
We need challenged. All of us do.
Amen.
I need challenge. I mean, I'll if you can read the scriptures and not feel a check or a challenge,
Right.
you're not reading the same one I'm reading.
I know. Well, I don't know what version you're reading.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I guess to your point on that is we can't be afraid to challenge people and to
Exactly.
push people. People need pushed. We all do.
Yeah.
Leaders got to be, they can't be afraid
Yeah.
to shake things up a little bit.
Amen. Amen. We know we're going to close this here in just a moment, but I know you've been pastoring now at Christian Heritage Worship Center for how many years now?
This is my third year, 2.5
3
years.
2.5 years.
Mhm.
Think about this. In your 2.5, almost 3 years, here's what you experienced. We were sharing this with Brother Mark earlier that in the first month,
Before.
before tell a little bit about this story. I mean, it's
So
crazy.
hold on, what story are we talking? Because we talked two stories.
the leg,
The leg,
first.
yes. Okay, so I'm helping the pastor, Russell, who is transitioning out, and I'm
Yeah.
coming in. I'm helping him move in December. We're in the garage that I now live in, or
Right.
we don't live in the garage, but
Right.
the garage that I
Of the
now
house, yeah.
put my stuff in. And I'm moving a safe for him. I'd moved the safe before, but this time I couldn't get it started. And so I had him get a 2x4 and I said, help me lift this. And he's like, well, hey, why don't we wait, brother, until some people get here? I was like, no, I can do it. I've done this before.
Ego, yeah.
Ego. There's that ego. There's that pride.
Right.
So I was like, no, just get it started. If it's too heavy, I'll just drop it. I was like, I've lifted this thing before. What he had forgotten was he had filled it with ammunition, filled to the
man.
brim.
Yeah.
So he pops that thing up and it just falls on me instantly, like dead weight on top of me, snaps my leg in half. I mean, really, like you seen the Paul George or the,
Sure.
the leg. It was that. I mean, it was out the wrong way. Get to the hospital. I had to have surgery a week later. So I'm coming into that was a month before, 3 weeks before I started pastoring. And so I come in my first week as pastor, my first month as pastor, I'm pastoring in a wheelchair or this little like scooter thing. And not just that, but I mean, that was painful.
Right.
And they had me on some heavy medication. So I'm pastoring like
You're
my
pastoring
first
high.
month. I'm flying, man. That first couple months, I flew through it. I did.
That is so fun.
It made my transition easier. God knew what he was
Took
doing.
the pain away.
Yes.
And then and this is like in your first year.
Oh, man,
you're
yeah.
dealing with number one, overcoming how to walk.
Oh, yeah.
Learn how to walk again.
Yeah.
In a cast, probably for how many months were you in?
Well, it was a boot.
Oh, the boot?
So I was non-weight bearing for 3 months?
Okay.
I couldn't put weight on my leg for 3
Yeah.
months. And then I went with the weight bearing with the boot for I think another 3 months.
Wow.
It was in June before I finally started walking normal or limping without a boot on.
So for the first 6-7 months, you're just trying to figure out how to walk.
Yeah.
And then 2020 comes around, or
Yeah.
the end of 2019,
Yeah.
you're faced with what everybody who's listening
Yeah.
right now has dealt with,
Pandemic.
COVID-19.
Yes.
All of a sudden now your church has just shut down.
Yep.
Go online, do whatever. And,
Yeah.
and many churches had a rude awakening. Because if
Yes.
you had no online presence,
Yeah.
unfortunately, we see churches now that don't exist
Yes.
because of that.
Yes.
So tell us how hard that was going through that.
Thank God that a lot of we were set up, and it wasn't no thanks to me. I mean,
Right.
we had been set up before. Online services had already been going on before we did
Yeah.
this. So it was not a bad transition. The problem was, I would say like July or August of 2019,
Okay.
we hit a stride. I mean, and we were doing great, man. We were rising.
Yeah.
Numbers were going, people were getting excited. And then, man, that pandemic hits and it was just like, halt, stopped. Everything stopped. And it was like, okay, and then we come back and we start going again. And then it was like another wave. And it was just, and so, it's just a hurdle.
Yeah.
I guess without them, life would be boring, right?
That's true.
But no, it wasn't. It was tough, but it was like you just do what you got to do, man. It's just you got to adapt, and you just gotta go, man. You just.
So really, we I think you mentioned this at camp this past summer, that first 2 years. I mean, you've had to overcome a lot.
Yeah, it's been challenging.
And so really, we're walking into your first year.
Yeah, and that's what I told. That's what I was just telling the congregation. I was like, year one, I was struggling to physically.
Yeah.
Year two, I didn't even they say pastoring would be easy if it weren't for the people. Well, that was year two. It was like I couldn't go see anybody. I couldn't do much.
Right.
And so now it's like I'm like really starting to pastor. But then we got and then we had. Now you still got this.
Still got it lingering.
COVID lingering and stuff.
Yeah.
And so, but it's odd. It's different, but.
Well, leading into that now, you've dealt with hard stuff the first 2 years.
Yeah.
I ask this question all the time in every episode. And that next week we're going to talk about teamwork. I'm going to have you back on, and we're going to talk about that side of the ministry. But from that standpoint, I ask this question often because I love vision. Where do you see yourself in this ministry going? CHWC. In the next 5 years.
Let me tell you how much. Do we have a couple minutes
You're
here?
good.
Let me tell you a quick story that will make this 5-year vision make a lot more sense.
Okay.
I remember being down in the valley, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've all been there. I'm getting ready to start pastoring the church, right? I had no vision of that. I was working a job, and you and I were talking about this. I was successful in it. I enjoyed it. I was making good money. I just had my second kid, and God calls me to pastor a church that at the time wasn't in the greatest of shape.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then some more stuff just piles on, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know how that goes. When it rains, it pours.
Yeah.
And I remember I'm walking on the church property to get something, and it was kind of chilly, and then it just started pouring down rain on me. I'm like, man, and I'm already in this pity party, right? I'm having a pity party, and then it starts raining on me in the physical, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm having this pity party, saying, God, what are you doing? Are you sure? I'm about to leave this job. And, what are you doing here? And then more people left and more problems arise. And I'm just like, what is going on? And I'll tell you, man, out of nowhere, and I'm sure you've experienced this, God just spoke to me. And it wasn't an audible, but I felt it so strong. God spoke to me, and I looked up and I could see our church. I seen the steeple.
Mm-hmm.
I seen the building. And God said, I've called this place to build my kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
And I've called you to lead it. And it was just so clear. And instantly, I went from a pity party to, okay, throw anything at me.
Yeah.
I have confidence, not confidence in myself,
Mm-hmm.
but I've got confidence that God will do what he said he will do.
That's awesome.
And when I come in with that, so it's like the broken leg. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
I broke my leg, broke it. I have 2 8-inch plates and 19 screws in my leg. Some people honestly told me this. Do you think you made a mistake? Maybe God's trying to tell you by breaking your leg.
Sure.
Hey, thanks for
This
the
is
support.
the door he's trying to shut.
Yeah, thank you. I was like, no, not at all. And not a shadow of a doubt came in. Nothing could close that door because I knew 100%. I was patient. I waited on God. God made a way. God spoke to me. I knew God was going to do it.
Yeah.
God's hand was in it. I don't care if my leg's broken. God's called me. Then COVID comes. Man, you're just one thing after another. You don't understand. God's called me. This is God's plan. This isn't mine.
Yeah.
I didn't make it happen. I didn't try to force it. It's God's plan. If it's God's plan, God's going to make it
That's
work.
right.
And I put my faith in him. So this is where I see us in 5 years. This is where I see us, and it's already starting now.
Mm-hmm.
A big thing that God has called me to is authentic Christianity.
Amen.
Christians being Christians.
Mm-hmm.
And we can start so many different places. You start with the true, authentic love. Jesus says in John 13:35, everyone will know you're my disciples. How will they know? By the love that you have for one another.
That's good.
And so it's just being true, authentic
That's right.
Christians, not putting on a front, not the, I'm not, and we throw the word fake around a lot,
Sure.
but I want to see authentic Christianity in our people. It's not just for the praise and worship leaders. It's not just for the pastors.
That's right.
It's for the people. And when we grasp what the Bible has called us to be, and to be that, and to challenge each other to be that, and we're getting ready to talk about teamwork.
Yeah.
To come together for a higher purpose, to set our
Amen.
mind on things above and not on things of this earth. That's where I see. And honestly, none of us know the future, and we can plan it out and it'll be all. But what I see is God creating an authentic Christianity, authentic Christians, and people being what God has called us to be to the best of our abilities, and to just minister in that capacity.
That's awesome.
And so in 5 years, do we have a building plan, or do we have all this? No, I don't really know all of that, but I do know that God, it's already started in our church. We're seeing it. We're seeing the true power of conversion of the soul.
Amen.
The blood of Jesus changing people's lives, creating disciples, and witnessing and being a light to the world, and being what God's called us to be.
Amen.
And I mean, it's just as simple as that.
That's it. We got to work on the foundation before you can build anything.
Absolutely.
So I love to hear that. I mean, you always hear the people want to get fancy and say, well, I see God preparing a 4,500 seat church. Well, that's great. But you have to have a foundation of people who are going to help you, which we'll talk about that next week on the teamwork. Well, I just want to come to a close. I thank you so much for taking this time of your day, whether you're watching this on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. I just appreciate you taking the time to join us on Bridging the Gap. And we'll see you next week on Bridging the Gap. God bless you.